Right now I'm about to read over the Fair Housing Act, page 153 of the Reference to Regulatory Compliance Guide. And the Fair Housing Act was enacted as part of the Civil Rights Act of 1968. When the act was passed, it prohibited discrimination based on race, color, religion, sex, and national origin in all phases of the housing industry. In 1988, the act was amended to make discrimination based on the familial status or handicap of a person illegal. The federal regulatory agencies have published regulations to implement the provisions of the Fair Housing Act that are applicable to the financial services industry. These regulations primarily are record-keeping requirements that ensure that the agencies can monitor institutions and determine whether illegal discrimination is occurring in residential lending practices. Coverage. The Fair Housing Act applies to any person or entity whose business includes engaging in real estate-related transactions such as making or purchasing loans or the selling, brokering, or appraising of residential real property. Therefore, all financial institutions are covered by the prohibitions against discrimination in housing-related credit. All financial institutions are covered by the advertising requirements of the Fair Housing Act and the record-keeping requirements for state non-member banks are governed by the FDIC and fair housing regulation found in Chapter 338 of the FDIC Code of Federal Regulations. The national banks are covered by the OCC Fair Housing Home Loan Data System in Chapter 27 of the Code of Federal Regulations, and savings associations are governed by the Office of Thrift Supervision's non-discriminatory requirements found under Chapter 528 of the OTS section of the Code of Federal Regulations, unless it's already been moved. Very well possible. Requirements. Institutions may not discriminate in any phase of housing-related lending transactions against persons because of their race, religion, color, national origin, sex, gender, familial status, having children under the age of 18, living at home, or handicap. Advertising. The FRB Board Order on Fair Housing Advertising and Poster Requirements dated March 20th of 1989, and FDIC regulation in Title 12 of the Code of Federal Regulations, Chapter 338.3 and 338.4 OTS regulations, similarly in Chapter 528.4, 5, and 9. And the OCC found it unnecessary to write a separate regulation for advertising. Advertisement is broadly interpreted to include statement stuffers, lobby brochures, posters, and so forth. The Fair Housing logo must appear in all written advertisements for real estate lending. All oral advertisements for real estate lending must contain a statement of non-discrimination, for example, equal housing lender. No advertising may contain any words, symbols, models, or other forms of communication that express, imply, or suggest a discriminatory preference or policy of exclusion. The Fair Housing poster or equal housing lender poster must be displayed in the institution's lobby where deposits are taken and loans are made. Other practices of redlining are discussed as federal courts and regulatory agencies have determined that the Fair Housing Act prohibits the practice of redlining. Redlining occurs when a lender provides unequal access to credit or unequal terms of credit because of race, color, national origin, or other prohibited characteristics of the residents of the area in which the credit seeker resides or will reside, or which residential property will be mortgaged is located. Appraisal is covered in the OCC regs and also Financial Institutions Letter 94 of 2012, or vice versa, 1994, number 12. Appraisal practices may be potentially racially biased and therefore may cause equal opportunity problems for a lender. In the cost approach to value, racial bias may be reflected in unsupported adjustments for functional and economic obsolescence.
Come and eat so you can get loaded up while it's daylight.
Okay.
This is all ready.
Okay, I'm almost ready.
I wouldn't let her have any more water soup till